Hello, everyone, and welcome to ET Travel World's virtual summit on the changing face of travel. According to a recent IATA prediction, the size of the revenue pool for airlines globally in 2021 will be about half of what it was in 2019. But then, the times that we are in, experts are optimistic even about this 50% drop. Predictions abound of the aviation industry entering a revenue funnel. The Indian aviation industry had already been struggling even before COVID. In spite of being the world's third largest market by departing passengers, India remains highly underpenetrated, even relative to other emerging markets. Its vast population suggests significant potential for growth. Moreover, international capacity accounted is constrained by bilateral relations. I recently heard Tony Fernandez, the group CEO of AirAsia, call the Indian aviation market not welcoming of outsiders. Of course, it goes without saying how COVID has affected the aviation industry in general, with airlines posting huge losses, throwing them into survival mode. Costs will need to be downsized, and airlines have been doing that all through this year, obviously in very important ways. But to reduce costs by half is impossible without a drastic change in profile. But enough of all that doom and gloom. The news of the vaccine has been a silver lining for humanity in general, and of course for the travel and aviation industry. Today, we have with us Dr. Vasudevan S. from the Strategy and Operations Group in KPMG to discuss the changing face of aviation. Vasu is also the global sector lead for the airports business and advises governments, airport owners, operators, and aviation stakeholders on policy, strategy, finance, operations, and transaction-related solutions. He has been actively engaged on various policy and regulatory matters. Welcome, Vasu, and we are glad that you could join us today.
Thank you, Perrin. It's a pleasure for me to be here and talking to you and ET.
Okay. Vasu, I'd like to begin by asking you, experts have been tracking aviation trends and they've been making these forecasts throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you give us some insights into trends you are seeing for air travel, specifically for India?
Okay. No, so I think we've been reading a lot about how traffic has been impacted, and I don't want to go into the depths of despair that the industry has seen since February this year. But I think on an optimistic note, if we look ahead, as you rightly pointed out, we are seeing a lot of green shoots in different markets across the world, be it the European Union, be it growing markets like India and China, Indonesia to some extent. Despite closed borders, they seem to have done well, at least in the domestic market. And that's surely a sign that we could expect to strengthen or build up in the months to come for two reasons. One, I think these countries which I mentioned with strong domestic markets have also been able to control the spread of the pandemic better vis-a-vis the European and American counterparts. That's one reason. And secondly, I think the governments have also been able to manage the sentiments of people wanting to take these flights. And both airports and airlines have worked hard in creating that environment and the positive sentiment for people to start taking these flights more regularly, which is the trend that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 months clearly. And I think from the data that we have from different sources, it's clear that we are at this point doing close to about between 2 and 2.5 lakhs passenger departures per day across the country, in India at least, if you want an India-specific view. China is doing much better than us as we speak. I believe the domestic traffic recoveries are much higher than what we've seen in the last quarter in India. But they also managed to stem the spread of the pandemic much earlier than us. And we are also seeing those trends now. And hopefully by the end of this financial year, we will see a much better trend of growth. And I think the government is working very hard to ensure that the current trend continues and the positive sentiment keeps improving, especially with the news of the vaccines hitting the market. Of course, India possibly will not be an immediate beneficiary, as all of us know, But I think the fact that the Indian flyer is conscious of that is still in a position to manage this whole transition from being a very reluctant flyer to somebody who's willing to take those risks is something that will help the industry, I think, come back to its heels very quickly, as long as we don't see a second wave.
That's so correct. We are all hoping that we don't see a second wave, as Europe has already witnessed one. Vasu, when we're talking about predictions and forecasts,
Yeah.
a lot of experts have also said that short haul regional market will open up first. However, in India's case, looking at what's happening right now, India has 22 air bubbles right now.
That's right.
And all these air bubbles are with countries that are further away. So when we talk about India, do you think that short haul regional market will open up first for India as well?
Actually, you need to contextualize that question in terms of what you mean by short haul. If you're referring to largely domestic traffic or flights operating for less than 2 or 3 hours, certainly I think that market is likely to improve much faster, as we've seen across the world. International travel has its own set of challenges, especially when you cross borders. But I think within the limited sphere of short haul travel, particularly on domestic routes, we're already seeing signs of some significant recovery on many of these trunk routes, especially in India and also in other markets in Asia. For example, if you see Delhi Bombay or Bombay Bangalore or Bangalore Hyderabad, the routes that have traditionally done well in terms of both load factors and consistency of traffic is something that we are likely to see happen going forward as well. The real challenge is about taking that confidence into international travel. And I think that's where there are a number of prerequisites that will determine how fast we grow on that segment. One of them clearly being on how well governments are prepared to deal with this whole new influx or exodus of people moving across borders, which is again largely linked to the systems that will be put in place, the standard operating procedures that will need to come in to ensure that it is safe to travel for people, both inbound and outbound. So yes, I mean, the short answer to that question is yes, short haul is going to see a much faster recovery than long haul. And we are already seeing signs of it in different corridors or routes.
Yeah, you mentioned something about SOPs being in place. We recently heard Qantas say that they would need full vaccination for people to get on their international flights. However, there are aviation bodies like IATA that have been calling governments to adopt a new universal testing regime, to reopen borders. So can these associations realistically convince governments to open themselves up to, some sort of testing regime instead of full vaccination required for international travels, while airlines are calling for full vaccination?
Okay. So I think your question is essentially on whether, vaccination certifications are more important than testing per se, right?
Correct.
Well, I think, again, it's still early days, Pedin, and let's understand that by all estimates, we all know that it's going to take at least about 2 to 3 years before a significant share of the world's population gets access to these vaccines. Any number of vaccines that are expected to hit the market, in the next 6 months. We already have, of course, the Pfizer vaccine being shipped across the world, and UK has been the principal recipient of that vaccine. But I think the big question about how effective these vaccines are, how many shots will people require, depending on origin and immunity and a whole host of other considerations, which I think people are still going to discover as more vaccines get administered across the globe, is something that we need to be conscious of. And I think eventually, for me, I think, looking at vaccination certificates or testing as an alternative, I don't think they should be looked at as substitutes, if you ask me. You will need both because of the length of this transition that will happen in any case, because as I mentioned, vaccines will take a while before they hit every segment of the population across the world, especially the flying population, right? So with that in mind, I think governments need to continue to focus on testing. What is really important when you roll out more testing in many of these markets is to ensure two things. One is, of course, credibility of who's issuing these certificates, and two is reliability, because you need systems in place, you need a strong governance mechanism in place to ensure that, not just aviation authorities in the region, but across the world are comfortable accepting these certificates on a regular basis without questioning the integrity or credibility of who's issuing them. I think that's going to be the key for more countries to open up borders as we pass through this vaccination phase as well. And eventually, of course, once we have enough doses of vaccines available and a fairly large section of the population gets vaccinated, then I think countries will get more comfortable relaxing some of these norms. But till then, I think the regime on testing has to be absolutely watertight. And there will be a lot of expectations between governments and between civil aviation authorities to ensure that there is some consistency and reliability in the processes that different governments and airlines and airports follow globally.
Yes, that's very correct. Till vaccination happens, we need to rely on testing. And I don't think we should really wait for a vaccine as well to reopen borders. And we've been seeing that, with various countries adopting the bubble model. Yeah. But the bubble model has been Vasu, it's been very fragile. And, the much talked about Hong Kong, Singapore travel bubble began with a 2-week delay and now a subsequent indefinite postponement, which everybody is hoping will happen around 2021. But do you think the fragility of the bubble model is what makes it, is the reason why we haven't seen too many bubbles coming up between countries?
It's a function of confidence, Pedin, isn't it? Because look, India, as you mentioned, has 22 such bubble agreements, right? And they were all essentially meant to be transient agreements or arrangements to facilitate essential travel, mostly. And of course, we've seen some very healthy load factors on some of these large trunk routes globally, to London, to other parts of Europe, to the US from India. But I think let's again understand that the whole bubble experiment was based on, how should I put it, two countries wanting to maybe tango to ensure consistent passenger flows, to support some minimum threshold level of traffic for various reasons, to help their carriers survive during this whole crisis, ensure that they jointly invest in confidence building measures and so on and so forth. So I think there is a fair degree of investment that both partner countries or the partner countries have made insofar as these 22 bubble agreements are concerned, which India has entered into. I don't have enough evidence to suggest or comment on what has not gone well or what has gone well with other bubble agreements. I think essentially it's been a function of how comfortable governments have been in allowing inbound and outbound traffic. And with respect to India, it's good to see that over a period of 6 or 7 months since we opened up international traffic, many more countries have shown confidence in allowing traffic to move both ways. And my only hope is that, of course, that positive sentiment should continue going forward. And all of us have heard the Honorable Civil Aviation Minister talk about relaxing the capacity constraints further early next year, and also possibly look at international travel as well, in a much more deregulated environment. And all those are good signs. It also reflects the fact that the government is constantly engaged in conversations with partner countries and friendly countries outside to ensure that this can happen, and this can happen without too much ado and without too much concern on the consequences. And all that is good to see. It essentially means that the government is preparing well for next year.
You've talked about the positive development in India with the air bubble arrangement. I wanted to talk about this only. With the air bubbles coming in India, we now have LCCs who are now looking to fly to long haul destinations. Right. SpiceJet was planning to fly to London. Yeah. Do you the long haul model will change or it will reinvent itself after COVID-19?
Look, I mean, this is a very dynamic market. Globally, we don't have, I mean, are you specifically asking about the low-cost long-haul market? Is that
Yes,
your?
yes.
Okay. Now, so this has been an experiment in the past as far as Indian carriers have been concerned. Of course, the world has been talking about it for a while, but I don't think we have too many successful examples, if you ask me. I mean, AirAsia X is still touted as one of the better examples of a low-cost carrier performing consistently well on international routes as a long-haul carrier. There are, of course, other examples within the European Union, and we know them well. But as far as long haul from India is concerned, I think the success of this model is essentially going to be determined by what passengers eventually will prefer. When I say eventually, I mean there is always an experimental phase for a new route or a new product or a service, which we've seen in the past. And India has obviously emerged as a very strong low-cost market in the last decade. And there are no disputes about that. And we know who the dominant carriers are. And the worrying part, of course, in my view, is that thanks to this crisis, we have Indigo, which obviously has done everything right in its perspective, being the most dominant carrier even today in Indian skies. So they hold between 55 to 60% of the market share even today. In fact, it's only gone up because other carriers have struggled to deploy capacity on certain routes. And kudos to them. I think they deserve being in that position. They worked really hard to be where they are. But having said that, I think from a consumer's perspective or the government's perspective, I think it's important to also see more competition coming into this space. We obviously don't want one dominant carrier because that may not be good news for flyers like us. So in that context, I think it is important to see how this long haul market will evolve. And as I said, it's going to be a function of both the preferences that passengers would have. And frankly, between you and me, I've been a frequent traveler before COVID, taking a flight out of the country almost every second month, sometimes every month. I've never somehow felt comfortable with the idea of flying long haul, even in economy, even if it's premium economy. Now, maybe that's my personal preference. But we really need to see if people are going to be so cost sensitive in the future that they're willing to make the standard compromises on brands and other benefits, that come to them by flying a full cost airline to go in favor of low cost. So I think it will work well for a while, but how sustainable it will be as a model, whether it's a SpiceJet or an Indigo or an AirAsia, which wants to run that service, is something only time will tell. But my own personal view is that it will have a limited set of flyers to adopt this in the initial years if it does come in. And that's another question mark because it also will throw up a lot of questions about the economics of flying low cost long haul. And if airlines are able to crack that puzzle and fly these routes profitably, and get a loyal bunch of customers to use or fly their carriers. I mean, maybe it's good for the industry as a whole because it would also put more pressure on traditional or full service carriers on both fares and the services that they can offer. And maybe it will open up the market a lot more, which may be good for the industry overall. That's my view.
Okay, by talking about your own travel plans and how you boarded a plane almost every month, you kind of read my mind about the next question, because I wanted to ask you now, with people working from home or even working remotely, and technology like Zoom and Meet, the kind of technology that we are using right now for this platform, will we be seeing a permanent reduction in business traffic? And would that affect, the premium economy and business class seats for airlines?
Okay, so let's face it, a lot of rationalization is going to happen with respect to corporate travel, right? And we know the reasons as well. Obviously, conserving cash is going to become a big priority. It already is a big priority, not just within the aviation business, but other companies as well. Right. So I think companies are going to try hard and restrict travel, even if travel opens up internationally. And I'm sure one of my company is one of them, which will look at it seriously as a cost-cutting measure. So I think it is, clearly going to affect the demand for business class seats. No doubt about that. But again, let's remember that long haul travel on a consistent basis generally creates its own business case for business class seats. So I think it may be a temporary phenomenon as far as I'm concerned. And with the industry coming back, and when I say that, I mean in a new form. As I keep saying, the industry is already reimagining the future in different ways. Businesses are going to transform in many ways because of the use of technology, because of a tighter focus on operations, trying to discover new methods of conserving or saving costs, focusing more on the passenger experience part, removing or rather restricting the investment in infra build, which can add significantly to capex. A lot of these things will happen in the next 6 to 12 months for sure, not just in India, but across the world. And it may, in a sense, help bring down the overall cost of travel for you and me. And I think in that scenario, again, the cost of a business class seat itself may change. And who knows, maybe you will have more competitive fares because both the airlines and airports would have found a new normal in terms of the cost curve, and that would make it easier for them to offer, a good mix of both business and economy class seats on various routes. So I think while I see a short-term impact on demand for business class seats, I really think that in a market like India, which I believe will come back very strongly once we find a cure or a vaccine that works, will essentially only grow from here, and it's likely to only create more demand, as I see it in the future for both kinds of segments.
Okay, Vasu, I've been talking about a lot of predictions that experts have been making. So I would like you to predict something about the Indian aviation sector, because as far as all of us know, the Indian government, there hasn't been much support coming in for the airlines like the other countries have done.
Yeah.
So do you think, of course, the airlines are already suffering? Do you think that this will further delay the recovery of the Indian aviation sector? Of course, because of the losses that they are running in.
Yeah, I mean, I think again we should understand one thing. We keep talking a lot about recovery, and we keep, of course, saying that since we are seeing a growth in traffic, and this is obviously going to improve the top line and so on and so forth. We have to understand recovery in two specific contexts, if you ask me. One is, of course, purely looking at the flyers coming back to the system, the cargo traffic going up significantly. And by the way, cargo is one part of the business that has done well during the crisis again. Largely helped by, of course, capacity not being available on many trunk routes and the need for movement of essential cargo across borders. So the carriers who've had the large capacity to deploy over long routes have certainly benefited through better margins. And even airports in India have gained from that, in terms of value accretion. So that's one part of the story. So in terms of traffic recovery or traffic growth, or the fact that we're seeing better numbers every month, clearly, of course, these are very encouraging signs, and it is going to help more cash coming into airlines. But let's also understand that there are a lot of legacy issues. Just because you see traffic coming back, it doesn't mean that the health of our carriers is going to change overnight. And this is where I think the government and regulators and, of course, the banking system needs to come together to ensure that they collaborate a lot more with industry or provide the necessary support required to make sure that we are again in pole position insofar as driving the growth in the world is concerned, which is clearly possible because we are one of the least penetrated markets in terms of aviation, as you know, 1/3 that of China, and 1/10 of USA, and 1/20 of UK. So those numbers are there to speak for themselves. So the potential is huge, which is why investor interest will continue in the Indian market, both in acquiring stakes in airlines or setting up a new carrier or investing in airport assets. So all that to me is a given. It's a question of when rather than whether. So I think and you were right. And we have seen significant relief packages given by various governments globally. The US, I think, was one of the first to come out with a significantly large financial package for airline business. Uh, I mean, amounting to about $25 billion plus an additional 25 billion in other forms of aid, which they've extended to the industry. Many of these large carriers, Singapore or Lufthansa or Cathay and others, have received significant financial support from their own governments, all with the intent of keeping these carriers alive, and for good reasons, because they do have a significant economic impact, as we all know. They create jobs, they create just jobs in the aviation industry, but also in other sectors which depend a lot on the aviation sector, like tourism, for example, or the transport sector. And therefore, I think given the multiplier benefits or the economic benefits of growth in the industry, those governments have taken a conscious call to pump in money and keep these airlines and airports alive. But unfortunately, in the Indian case, there are other challenges which are quite unique, and we all know that our government has these fiscal challenges. There is going to be always a trade-off between supporting what is perceived as an elite sector in India even today, as aviation, vis-a-vis other, socio-economic demands for other sectors, which are in an equally dire need for funds and support. And in that context, I think the industry has to fend for itself, at least for some time. But I think it is important at some point for the government to step in and give some relief, at least in terms of reforming policy, in terms of reducing the cost of doing business in India. And we all know that the aviation business is a high-cost business in India vis-a-vis other markets in the world. So, for example, why can't the government seriously think about reducing the VAT on ATF across all airports? Why should it be a relief given only for regional connectivity? Because that sector itself is suffering a lot because of a huge fall in international and domestic traffic. Why can't the government look at, for example, bringing aviation turbine fuel under GST, a demand that has been there for many years now? Maybe it's a good time to look at that option today. Of course, the government has given some incentives to the MRO sector now, which is again another sunrise sector, if you ask me, given the growth that we like to see. I think as far as the MRO sector is concerned, I think the government has made its intention very clear, and it is from the industry's perspective, it's something that can generate significant gains for Indian businesses, especially for Atmanirbhar Bharat, because a lot of these companies are looking at India seriously, given the potential for fleet growth, and of course the additional opportunities that it will open up within the engineering and maintenance sector. So I think while things have been done by the government, somewhere along the way between the airline, airport regulators and the government, primarily the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the Airports Authority of India, they will have to find a way to ensure that there is some kind of a bailout package available for carriers going forth, especially when they see recovery, coming back in the form of traffic and both domestic and international, and the fact that that in itself will give confidence to both the investors and the government that any relief that they provide now is only going to be paid back many times over in the next 3 or 4 years. So I think there is a strong investment case for financial support. In what form it should come and to whom it should be given and how it should be prioritized is something that the government needs to sit down and work out with the key industry stakeholders.
Okay, Vasu, for an industry that you said now has to fend for itself, at least for some time, if we have to talk about going forward, what will the platform for future growth be? Of course, it's something I'm asking you, of your opinion on it. And what do you think will shape that growth? Because, industry revenues are going to slump by more than half of 2019 levels in 2021 as well.
No, fair point. As I said earlier, traffic coming back is not necessarily the only good news, or rather good news for the carriers at least. But I think the long-term secret sauce for this industry to come out is essentially about finding a way to bring down the cost of doing business in India, right? So, as I mentioned, a couple of those elements on the fiscal side clearly are opportunities to reduce the cost of flying. I think the other big area that airport owners or investors should look at clearly is to see if they can bring down the cost of infrastructure itself. And when I say that, I mean, can you reduce the footprint of the airports in future, the land requirement, for example, with more technology coming into airport processes. Clearly, there's an opportunity for airport and infrastructure builders to see how they can minimize spends and use their assets more efficiently in terms of sweating existing assets and as well as creating new assets which can perform better for lesser investment, so to speak. For example, let's say you end up digitizing most of the check-in processes through the DigiYatra program or through the use of biometrics, self-back check-in, RFIDs, mobile as a device to carry out your transactions and so on and so forth. Frankly, it can significantly reduce the need for extensive build for passenger concourses, baggage check-in areas, ramp handling, and all of that. Now, some of them will remain because they will be essential or statutory services and will need to be compliant with international laws, which also will change over time. But I'm just giving you a sense of where these cost optimization opportunities exist and what investors could do to capitalize on them with the use of better technology or more efficient processes. So I think the long-term certainty of this industry becoming profitable, both for airlines and airports, and they have to work in tandem in this business, is to see how they can bring down the cost line significantly. And from the airlines' perspective, I think fuel still remains their biggest cost. And I think anything that's done to give them certainty on the tax structure in terms of at least keeping it at a flat rate or giving them relief in airports which are linked to volumes and so on and so forth. And there are many ways in which you could do it to encourage traffic to come in, to encourage more flyers and so on and so forth. All that, I think, will eventually help in making flying cheaper for the average Indian. And that really is the key because it is going to be a volume game. And at some point, you will see that as we fly more people and at a lower cost, the industry will soon find a way to become profitable. And we've seen that happen in some of the good years in the past as well. So I don't see a reason why it can't happen in the future.
Thank you very much, Basu. And we are ending with the magic word profit here. You've offered much food for thought for us today. And we hope that through you, we've been able to disseminate the best information to our audience. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. Thanks for the opportunity. Bye.